Welcome students. Today we will talk about international regimes and the world order. Now the study of international regimes has been an important part of international relations since the Second World War. The study of international regimes is an effort to understand the means and conditions under which states cooperate with one another. Now, what do we mean by international regimes? Although international regimes started to proliferate after the Second World War, there was lack of conceptual clarity about international regimes. It was not before the 1980s that international regimes were concretely defined, and the credit goes to Stephen D. Krasner, Krasner, Stephen D. Krasner, who wrote an article in the famous journal International Organization in 1982. And in that article, Krasner gave us a very concrete definition of international regimes. According to him, Krasner defined regimes as, I quote, implicit or explicit principles, norms, rules, and decision-making procedures around which actors' expectations converge in a given area of international relations. Unquote. Regimes are more specialized arrangements that pertain to well-defined activities, resources, or geographical areas, and often involve only some subset of the members of international society. Regimes may or may not take the form of international organizations. Let me clarify. When nation states, different states, when they come together to form one organization for specific interests or for geographical purposes or on some principles, we call it an international regime. Like the International Atomic Energy Agency, IAEA, this is not really an international organization in the strict sense of the term, but this is an international regime because states have come together to form IAEA for monitoring nuclear activities. I mean, activities related to nuclear export and import, or even proliferation of nuclear weapons. So, as I told you, that regimes, international regimes, may or may not take the form of international organizations. IAEA, I gave the example of IAEA as an international regime. Earlier, the Bretton Woods system under which the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, or the World Bank operated, the Bretton Woods system or the IMF, World Bank, they may be called international regimes. In fact, they are examples of international regimes. Now, the WTO has replaced the Bretton Woods system. The WTO has become another example of international regime because it monitors trade policies around the world. So similarly, after the Second World War, a lot of such regimes have come up globally. I can give you another example. Antarctic Treaty System that emerged in 1959 operates without any administrative apparatus. The Antarctic Treaty System, which appeared in 1959, has no administrative apparatus. So, what I want to emphasize is that regimes may not be an international organization, but regimes may work globally. In that sense, we call them international regimes. As I said, regimes may vary in their degree of specificity, their geographic scope, and membership. They may vary according to their work, and I mean the degree of specificity. In the example I have just given, IAEA, it is a very specific organization, a very specific regime, I would say, because it works only on atomic energy issues. So another organization may work on another area. That is why we say that their degree of specificity varies. Sometimes their geographical scope and membership may also vary from one to the other. I mean, the Antarctic Treaty System is not applicable to other geographical areas. So from geography to the nature of work to the membership, number of membership, international regimes may vary. But as I said, now we have concrete idea about international regimes which we lacked earlier, just after the Second World War. So from 1945 say to the 1980s, although international regimes proliferated, international regimes came up in great numbers, but we lacked conceptual clarity. Now, when we have definite ideas about international regimes, a lot of international relations theories are also being related to international regimes. Now I will talk about the theoretical perspective on international regimes, and I will take up three major theoretical perspectives in the study of international relations, or to be more specific, three theories in the study of international relations, and relate them to the study of international regimes. These three theories are the realist theory, number one; number two, the neoliberal theory, which is of course an offshoot of liberalism, earlier liberalism, and the cognitivism. These three theoretical perspectives, and I will relate them to international regimes system. Now, the central variable of realism is power. Realism believes that anarchy is very natural in international system, because power, the nation states, they hanker after power, and that is why conflict, anarchy is quite natural. In neoliberalism, according to realists, international regimes would be formed on the basis of power, where states' interests converge around the issue of power. They will form international regimes. But neoliberalism, although they started with the same premise that yes, anarchy may be important, but according to them, interests, other interests, states are concerned primarily with interests and not really power. So their interests may converge on the area of peace, not on conflict. So they believe that international regimes may be formed for absolute gains. In contrast to the realists believe that international regimes would be formed around maximizing gains. So I repeat, because the central variable in realism, the realist theory, is power, they come together for relative gain. States here under realist position, states would form international regime for relative gains. So states would not enter into any agreement that would leave them in a worse position in relation to others. So relative gain is their motive here, relative gain. But in neoliberal theory, in neoliberalism, states would come to form international regimes for absolute gains, because neoliberalism believes in economic prosperity, in economic cooperation, economic prosperity, and more economic engagement. So they would think about absolute gains maximizer, or in other words, we may say that according to neoliberal theorists, states would come together to form international regimes for absolute gains maximizer. In cognitivism, the central variable is knowledge. So rather than power or interest, states would be inclined to form international regimes for the sake of knowledge, for the sake of maximizing international cooperation. So cognitivism believes in ideas, in knowledge. So rather than material gain, they would prefer to form international regimes when their ideas converge. So this theoretical position is very important. I took up three important theories in the study of international relations: realism, neoliberalism, and cognitivism, and showed how their perceptions differed in relation to the formation of international regime, formation and work of international regime, where I again tell you that while realists would be inclined to say that international regimes would be formed only when the power, the ambition for power, or when states seek power and they don't, one single state, when it sees that it has interests and it won't be in a worse position in relation to others, it would agree to form international regime. In simple words, all the states would try to have relative gains when they form international regimes. But in neoliberal theory, the international regimes are formed on the basis of interests. When mutual interests converge, they form international regimes, and their aim is absolute gains maximizer. All the states would try to have absolute gains from this international, from the formation of international regimes. But in cognitivism, they would rather form when their ideas converge. And constructivism is an offshoot of cognitivism. Constructivism is a very important theory in international relations today. When states' ideas want that they form an international regime, only the regime would be formed. So these are the theoretical perspectives of international regimes. I mean, when we try to relate international regimes to theories, to the theories of international relations. Here I should talk about the hegemonic stability theory. That is another theory, the hegemonic stability theory, when international regimes are formed, say, by a state which is normally known as a hegemon, and because of its superiority in the international system, the regime, international regime, gets some form of stability, gets some form of prestige, we may say. One example, USA has been instrumental, United States of America has been instrumental in the formation of the Bretton Woods system, the IMF, the World Bank, and if USA is considered as a hegemon, the Bretton Woods system got stability because of the superiority of the United States of America. Because United States of America has been a very strong power, it was a superior, it was in a superior position in international system. So it played a very crucial role in stabilizing these international regimes. Later on, the WTO, it has now become accepted, it has now become stabilized because of the active role played by the USA, active support provided by the USA. Therefore, the hegemonic stability theory believes that one hegemon, when it is behind formation of international regimes, the international regimes get some sort of stability, it may work for a longer period of time, it may attain some status, some prestige, and therefore it may work effectively. So that is why these theories are important. Theories in international relations that are very much in vogue in today, they have different perspectives about international relations, I mean in international regimes. Likewise, as I said, cognitivism believes that not only material gains, the role in the players, actors, ideas, their willingness to work together for a greater cause may play an important role behind the formation and activities of international regimes. Three scholars, Hassan Clever, Peter Mayer, and Rittbarger, they have done extensive work on the theoretical perspectives that may lead to the formation and work of international regimes. International regimes are often formed in response to a need to coordinate behavior among countries around an issue. So, in simple words, in our world today, states need to cooperate. Different countries need to come together and form international bodies which may not be typically international organizations. They come together to form international bodies, we may say international agencies, to work for their common interests. And that is how international regimes are formed. There are so many examples. I gave examples of IAEA, earlier the Bretton Woods system under which the IMF and the World Bank operated. Now the Biological Weapons Convention, the Chemicals Weapons Convention, the MTCR. These are all examples of international regimes. So international regimes may be formed for specific interests. They may be formed to regulate the behavior of the states. They may be formed again for geographical purposes. They may be formed for humanitarian activities. But when such international agencies are formed, like the IAEA, we call them international regimes. So purposes, specificity may vary. There may be economic purposes, like the IMF, International Monetary Fund. There may be states may think that they need to regulate the behavior of other states for some purpose. That is why IAEA was formed, to regulate the nuclear activities of the states. That was the sole purpose of IAEA, which was formed after the Second World War, when nuclear proliferation became a threat to the world order. There may be other organizations formed around purposes like environment, like human rights, like labor issues, like child issues. So when states of the world, when they come together for specific purposes to form international agencies, international bodies, they are nowadays called international regimes. And now the study of international regimes has become so interesting that different theoretical positions, theoretical perspectives are originating and proliferating around the study of international regimes. That is why I talked about the three mainstream theories of international relations: realism, neoliberalism, and cognitivism, to show how their perspectives differ around the issue of international regimes. And I also talked about the hegemonic stability theory, which believes that a strong power must encourage and support the formation of such agencies, such bodies. And that is why examples of USA supporting the Bretton Woods system, USA supporting the IMF or the World Bank, and thus giving them some sort of stability, that was also a theoretical perspective that became important in terms of in the study of international regimes. So international regimes, the study of international regimes now in the 21st century, it has many facets. It has, in simple words, it has many aspects. It has theoretical aspects as well as its actual application side. So when we talk about the theoretical perspectives of international regimes, we must know that different theoretical schools, different schools of theory, they differed around the issue of formation and activities of international regimes. And therefore, the study has become more important, more crucial. Now, the world order today, it actually works alongside international regimes, if we may say so, because we have several international organizations working, like the UNO, which has a definite charter, which has a definite administrative structure, which has some important functional attributes. We have the UNO working in our world order. Side by side, we have several international regimes working for the world order. And these international regimes, they are actually helping the world order to survive, the world order to work effectively. And say in the areas of security, I gave examples of biological weapons convention, the chemicals weapons conventions, the MTCR. They all are actually regulatory agencies to control the behavior of the states. Biological weapons convention is an attempt by the states of the world to control biological weapons so that biological weapons may not pose a danger to the current world order. Similarly, CWC, Chemical Weapons Convention, is another endeavor of the states to control, to regulate the proliferation of chemical weapons. That is another example of international regime. So international regimes are now working alongside our international system, international relations, to help stabilize the world order. In simple words, international regimes and the world order are, in a word, they are complementary to each other. The world order today is incomplete without international regimes, and international regimes must work under the current world order. So all the international regimes, the IAEA, the NPT, the CTBT, the FMCT, CWC, they are all actually helping the world order to survive, to maintain the status quo. International regimes, I conclude by saying that they are attempts of the states to formulate international bodies around specific purposes, and sometimes in order to regulate the behavior of the states.